Hello, and welcome to the Phantom Cries, a Real Postpartum podcast, the podcast where we challenge societal norms and dive into postpartum topics that truly matter to thrive, not survive in your parenting journey. I'm Allie B, your host, and today we're having an important conversation about the truth about postpartum, and more importantly, challenging the narrative to redefine the standards surrounding it. Now, let's dive in. Welcome to the Phantom Cries, a Real Postpartum podcast, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Allie Buchanan, and I'm beyond excited to bring you tools and tips to help you thrive, not survive in the fourth trimester. Because let's face it, postpartum is forever, and we shouldn't be doing this alone. All right, for the inaugural episode, we're going to start strong, and as a doula, childbirth educator, content creator, and most importantly, a wife and mom of two with lived experience struggling through perinatal anxiety and postpartum depression, I'm passionate about the postpartum journey because I know firsthand the struggles and have helped countless parents with the challenges that they faced on their journey. Today, we're putting the spotlight on societal expectations paired with the often overlooked aspect of postpartum recovery, and that's rest. So what is the current narrative? Right now, the expectation is focused on bouncing back. It is a huge pressure point for many newly postpartum parents. Society often holds expectations for new parents to bounce back quickly after childbirth, as well as maintain this Instagram-worthy, perfect motherhood mentality. This pressure to conform to certain postpartum standards can be overwhelming. We're bombarded with images of celebrities and their seemingly effortlessly way of regaining their pre-baby bodies, and it creates unrealistic expectations for the rest of us. But the truth is, the postpartum experience is unique for everyone. Now, let's define postpartum. Postpartum is often misconstrued as postpartum depression, when in fact, postpartum's clinical definition is the time period immediately following birth when maternal physiological and anatomical changes return to the non-pregnant state. The postpartum period, also known as puerperium, starts following the expulsion of the placenta until complete physiological recovery of various organ systems occurs. Again, even that definition focuses on returning to a physiological state. So think about that as we move through this episode. Culturally, we understand postpartum as the fourth trimester. We are also mainly aware of postpartum as it relates to that singular follow-up visit at 6 weeks with an OB. Right now, I have a smidgen of hope that the US will move the needle in the right direction, especially since ACOG now has an official recommendation that came out in 2018 that states postpartum should be an ongoing process rather than a singular time frame or checkpoint, and that all women should have contact with their OBs continuously during this period. Sounds good on paper, but again, it just remains vague to me as opposed to the midwifery model of care that can provide anywhere from 3 to 6 visits in the first 6 weeks after birth. The other glimmer of hope comes from the Momnibus Act that looks to address issues like extending WIC eligibility during postpartum and breastfeeding periods, supporting moms with maternal mental health and substance use, and there are 11 additional bills that encompass socioeconomic access, racial barriers, and more. Unfortunately, and this is where the silver linings dim for me, is that the bill is stalled. Not surprised. And it's been stalled since it was introduced in 2021. My bet is that we will continue to have the highest maternal mortality rate of a wealthy country. And to be honest, that could be a whole nother episode. Now that sets us up. How can we really challenge this narrative around postpartum recovery? And honestly, how we need to. So let's talk about the importance of rest. You will hear me shout from the mountaintops to take this time for you to rest and heal. Because it's not just about physical recovery, it's about mental and emotional well-being too. Rest should be seen as a crucial part of the healing process, not a luxury or something to feel guilty about, especially because we will have our whole rest of our parenting lives to do the laundry, cook, and do all the other things. So please consider giving yourself more time to heal. Why is this important? Let's talk about the benefits of rest. I recently came across some interesting studies that highlight the benefits of adequate rest during the postpartum period. In fact, one of my favorite books about postnatal depletion is by Dr. Oscar Seralak, and I apologize if I
butchered your last name from somebody who has a hard last name too. But Dr. Oscar believes that over 50% of mothers suffer from some degree of postnatal depletion. It's not just about getting back on your feet. It's about laying the foundation for long-term health and well-being. Improved mental health, better bonding with your baby, and a more robust physical recovery are just a few of the advantages of resting in the early postpartum timeframe. A study in 2015 showed that having strong social support during the postpartum period can reduce the risk of postpartum depression. The ones who didn't receive as much support or didn't take that necessary time to rest often felt more overwhelmed, more anxious, and more depressed. And oftentimes they blamed themselves for these feelings. And let's not forget the legendary Tricia Hershey, founder of the NAP Ministry, who preaches that rest in its simplest form becomes an act of resistance and a reclaiming of power because it asserts our most basic humanity. Her book is life-changing, and I think she's coming out with a card deck too in a couple of weeks, so go and check that out because it's really about practicality and embracing rest. So now let's get practical. How can we as a society support and encourage new parents to embrace rest? Whether you're a friend, a family member, or the one going through the postpartum journey, there are things that we can all do to contribute to a healthier, more realistic postpartum experience. Now, I want you to think about something too, because I separated two concepts. The two concepts of sleep and rest. They are very different activities, very different, which is why I'm focusing on rest. Rest relates to activities that are restorative. Examples include journaling, crafting, reading, going on walks, just to name a few. And I'm going to link in the show notes to a worksheet for you to write down ideas for you to enjoy rest, because I remember talking to a client and she was like, Allie, I can't sit still and I just can't rest like that. And I remember saying, like, that's okay, because rest looks different for everybody. You need to find what's going to work for you. You need to find the rest in the form of healing and self-care that works for you, and break things down simply. Don't overthink it, because let's be honest, that's what we do. So make sure you check out that link, because filling out that worksheet, it's going to be applicable whether you are pregnant, you just gave birth, whether you're a parent or not, it's going to help you. Now, in our final segment, I want to discuss how we can collectively change the narrative surrounding postpartum. Let's challenge these unrealistic standards, celebrate the diversity of postpartum experiences, and get away from this bounce back culture that prevails in today's society. The biggest thing I can say is our bodies don't just bounce back after baby. We're not a ball. Our hormones, our pelvic floor, our mental health, our nutrient stores, our neurological wiring in our brains, our relationships, our self-image, our thoughts. All of this is changed forever. Like, thank you, Matrescence. Like, that's what happens. And that's also why I say that postpartum is forever, because there's always a constant evolution of your body as you move through parenthood. So if that's not convincing enough, here are 4 other reasons why the narrative on postpartum bounce back culture should be changed. Number 1, again, the unrealistic expectations. The notion of that quick postpartum bounce back creates unrealistic expectations for new moms and parents who are expected to regain their pre-pregnancy bodies and return to their normal activities within a short period of time. This can be both physically and mentally challenging, and it can contribute to feelings of failure and low self-esteem. Historically, different cultures like Chinese philosophy, the cuarentena for Latino cultures, even the Bible, have set aside a large chunk of time, typically the first 40 days right after birth, to focus on mother-baby bonding, breastfeeding, and overall healing. The other thing historically that has happened, if you look back at the past few hundred years, is that women and the families in society were in a village format. They made sure to support each other and surround each other with the elders, the ancestors, the moms, the aunties, the abuelas. They were there to help each other and support each other through this transformative experience. And so if we don't challenge this unrealistic expectations, what we're doing is, number 2, we're reinforcing those harmful cultural norms. So if you are trying to bounce back, you're supporting the cultural norm that prioritizes appearance and physical ability over mental and emotional well-being. Again, this contributes to negative body image. It can lead to disordered eating and other harmful behaviors. especially in a society where fat phobia and body dysmorphia is prevalent, where on average 1 in 50 people suffer from BDD, we need to understand that giving birth, experiencing matrescence is a major overhaul in a person's life. And some folks move through this with ease. God bless you all. Others, not so much. And if we can encourage and normalize this conversation around we are still the same person and we're just going to be experiencing life in a new format. I like to give the analogy of the fixer-upper, Chip and Joanna Gaines, right? When they see a house, they see good bones, that there is a foundation. You are the foundation. You just went through a renovation, right? Maybe some shiplap, some new paint, an open concept, right? And you now have to get used to this new layout, this new way of life. And how can we do this? This leads to number 3, that you can recognize the physical and emotional changes of motherhood and parenting. And in fact, it's that lack of recognition that leads to the reinforcement of number 1 and number 2. We want to get away from the bounce back mentality. Postpartum bodies and the changes that come after birth are not appreciated. That focus on the bounce back detracts from the reality that motherhood and parenting brings, that it is a profound and transformative experience, both physically and emotionally. This also contributes to my final topic of deprioritizing yourself. Bouncing back can lead to ignoring the importance of self-care. And I don't know if you're like me and you struggle with the buzzword of self-care. It sounds really cliche, and oftentimes people think of playing masks and cucumbers and, paying $100 for a pedicure. But when I talk about self-care, I want you to focus on daily rituals, small goals and habits, and developing legit practices that are based in mindfulness to take your self-care to the next level. And when you're able to prioritize rest with a self-care practice based in mindfulness, you are setting the stage for what's essential for your healing and well-being, mentally, emotionally, and physically. It's balancing your needs alongside the needs of others instead of neglecting them altogether. Woo! That was a lot, but I really do feel that by changing this narrative on postpartum bounce back culture, we can create a more supportive and inclusive environment for all. At its core, this means recognizing and appreciating the physical and emotional changes that come after birth, prioritizing self-care, and valuing mental and emotional well-being over appearance, physical ability, and productivity. Again, I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for joining us on this inaugural episode of the Phantom Cries, a Real Postpartum podcast. I hope that this conversation inspires you to rethink the postpartum narrative and how you heal, recognizing the importance of rest towards holistic recovery. I can't wait for you to join me in the next episodes where we're going to get real deep into postpartum planning, why we're doing it wrong, and how we can change it. Remember, it's okay to give yourself permission to rest. You've got this, friend, and until next time, you have the power to make your day. Take care.
As a disclaimer, this podcast does not provide medical advice. The topics discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only. Please see the 40daydoula.com/disclaimer for more info.